Welcome to the Waves Business Coaching Podcast. Here at Waves Business Coaching, we believe that people are the most difficult, challenging, and expensive part of every organization, and we help people build their dream team so that they can have the time to focus on what's most important to them. I'm your host, Jacob Karnes, a business coach and author of Master Your First Job. This week on the podcast, I interview a friend of mine, Dustin Riechmann, about building a community around you. Dustin's built an amazing business and community that I'm a part of, and he is an expert on building valuable relationships and surrounding yourself with amazing people. We talk about why community is so important and how to build or find one right where you are. Excellent episode. Before we get there, I did write a book called Master Your First Job, and this book is to help first-time employees thrive in their roles and to help business owners and leaders better understand and develop their young talent. If you'd like a free copy, you can go to masteryourfirstjob.com/free, which is linked below in the episode description, and get a free digital copy of the book. There's also a link there to buy a paperback or hardcover version if you'd like that instead. Let's dive into my conversation with Dustin about why community is so important and how you can build one right where you are. Dustin, thanks so much for being on the Waves Business Coaching Podcast. This is a full circle moment. I'd love for you to share a little bit about you and your story.
Yeah, so it's full circle because the end of my story it has a lot to do with podcasting, and so I'm sure we'll get to that. But the short version of my kind of crazy story and how I became the podcast guesting guy is I actually had a professional engineering career for 17 years. So, civil engineering degree, bachelor's, master's, taught at college, held a couple different professional titles there, and that will be relevant to your audience. Hired some young and not so young people, and got into management. But about halfway through that career, I had a real entrepreneurial bug and started doing side businesses. And actually, my wife and I were doing marriage ministry, and I just felt like there was a better outlet for it. This is like circa 2009 when blogging was a big thing.
That's right.
And so I created my first website in 2009, and then learned that. And then learned digital marketing, and then really found a passion for digital marketing. So by 2017, so there's a significant 8-year period where I was doing both. But by 2017, I ended up leaving engineering and became a full-time self-employed entrepreneur. And so that chapter of my life was marketing consulting. So I started doing consulting for lots of different online and local businesses, and worked in all kinds of crazy industries with lots of cool stories that came from that. And one of those businesses was a local butcher shop. And so there was another period of time where I became a partner with the owner of that business and basically started to sell things online for him. And this became a brand called Fire Creek Snacks. So a meat stick company.
Yeah.
The meat stick company taught me a whole new side of the world, and we got into retail and wholesale and trade shows, and that was going pretty well. And March 2020 arrived, and I'm driving to a trade show in Chicago from my home in St. Louis. It was canceled, of course, because of COVID, and turned around and came back home. And within 2 weeks, I had lost about 80% of my clients that were local businesses that were shut down. And that is where podcasts enter the equation, because I needed a new outlet for that business. And so I got into podcasting as a marketing channel. That kind of became its own thing. And so over the ensuing couple of years, I started coaching people on marketing and podcasting specifically. And so for the past 3 years, I've got this brand 7-figure leap, where I work with entrepreneurs and we help them get their message out and grow their business using podcast guesting as the preferred marketing channel. So that, it's engineering, marriage, marketing, meat sticks, and now I run mastermind groups and build community around this entrepreneurial adventure that I've been on.
Which is amazing because, I thought about having you as a guest, and I'm like, oh, podcasting, he's the podcasting guy. It's what he's known for. But the full circle thing is really what you're really good at is you use podcasting as this front of that solves a problem, right? And then you build these communities, and relationship marketing is a part of that. But that's to me like your true secret sauce, your talent is that, which is why I was like, that's what I want to interview Dustin about is this community. Before we get there, and I have more questions about your story, I would love to know, my book, Master Your First Job, about young employees and their first job. What was your first job?
My first job was hay baling. So I grew up in a very rural area.
Yeah.
And so when I was 12 years old, I had a friend who had an older brother, and they would pick me up all summer and drop me off at fields of hay, like horse farms. And I was a skinny runt and with no strength. And it was absolutely horrible job. I made $4.25 an hour, and it was the hottest, dustiest, nastiest job ever. And I would work 12 hours a day, taking bales of hay onto wagons and then taking them from wagons into barns, and spent all of my money on baseball cards and had nothing to show for it. So that was my first job, and then my first like W-2 job was
Yeah,
actually at McDonald's, and so
there you go.
I'm a McDonald's guy when I turned 16 and could drive. So
I did remember the McDonald's thing now that you say that. That's funny. So no cool baseball cards.
I still have them all in my basement. My son destroyed about half of them when he was younger and wanted to like play with the baseball cards. But no, like I later became an engineer, right? So
Yeah, yeah.
I had notebook pages where I would like catalog all these things and get the
Oh, of
Beckett's
course.
Baseball Monthly and update the
That's right.
values. And so I thought I was like making bank, but I never sold any of them. Never made any money. I just spent it all.
That's hilarious. Yeah, and now I feel like it's at the height of its popularity. It's made a huge comeback, like
Yes.
card trading, and it kind of took me by surprise. I mean, just starting with engineering to, seven-figure leap. I mean, you've grown an incredible business over the last 3 years. You won't brag about it, so I'll brag about it for you. Like the leaps you've made, and I've kind of gotten a little bit of an inside view as far as how you've grown your business is really, really impressive. And I think one of the most important things you've done is help people build community. And I think it's been one of the backbones of your business. Why do you believe community is so critical for, I'll say, especially business owners to have, right? Because we can talk about business leaders, and there's a little bit of that, I think, built into at least some structure. If there's other people on your level, and yes, that's important, but why is it so critical for business owners?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of reasons. I mean, I think first and foremost, loneliness. I think if you're an entrepreneur or business owner, let's say you're a solopreneur, entrepreneur. It's obvious you're lonely. You're like a founder, and it's kind of just you, and maybe you have some contractors. But even if you're a business leader inside of an organization, which again I was for many years in my
Right.
engineering career, it's still lonely because in that organization you're the boss, and maybe you take your people out to lunch every once in a while, but it's kind of weird, and you can't socialize with them because that's
Yeah.
like a decorum thing. And so, like, who else can you relate to at that level? And because the only people you can really relate to in your community and your like physical locale are the peers at other companies who are your competition. So
Right.
that's kind of weird, right? And so I feel like, yeah, in general, the more you move up the ladder, the lonelier it gets because you just kind of by default don't have many peers. So I think that's a big part of it. And I think from a professional development and if you're an entrepreneur, the business development side of things, that community is the best tool for getting clear on like what you want to do and how you serve. And it's also like the source for a lot of relationship building, and that relationship building then has huge market value, right? So it's both sort of there's sort of the internal component of what it does for you as a human, of having a community and a place to belong and a place to share wins and celebrate and talk about real issues that you're dealing with. But then there's also a huge business case to be made. If you're in a community with the right people, your network is your net worth, right? And this idea that like doing that proactively really grows your influence and helps you either get a raise, find better talent, or if you're running your own business, actually grow your revenue.
I love the your network is your net worth. I've never even heard that. So
Really?
that
Okay. I thought it was
I know.
cliche.
There you go. No,
It's like
that's
in my head all the time, but it's so true. And when you think about people that you admire, maybe in your organization or
yeah.
peer organizations, the ones who are most successful know a lot of people and people respect them and they're in some sort of community. I almost guarantee they're in some sort of community, right? Whether that's a mastermind, a chamber of commerce, some philanthropy boards that they're on, they are well networked. And that is a core reason why they have a higher net worth or,
Yeah.
our market value.
That's huge. When I think about the human side of this, I think about Viktor Frankl in Man's Search for Meaning. Incredible book. I talk about it a lot. And one, he talks about community as this idea of helping solve a human problem. But two, he was a part of community. If you look at all these famous psychologists from the early, mid 20th century, they're all hanging out in Vienna at the same time. And it's like, I just don't think that's a coincidence that all these smart people were all hanging out together and in a community and, maybe landed on very different ideas. But, we studied them all still in psychology and, they were all very smart. And hanging out together. I read a book last year, Bandersnatch. Have you ever read this?
I've not read it. I actually have it on my Kindle because
Okay.
I know what it is, and I want to let you talk about it because I haven't read it, but I was very attracted to the ideas.
Great book, written very well. It's about the Inklings. The Inklings
Yes.
were a group of writers, the most famous two being J.R. Tolkien, who wrote Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit, C.S. Lewis, who wrote The Chronicles of Narnia, and many other books. And it tells a great story of how they built their community. But literally, they would just show up and like bring their work. They'd have an agenda sometimes they wouldn't. And they just made each other better. A funny nugget from that is that J.R. Tolkien hated the Chronicles of Narnia
Oh
and
yeah,
told C.S. Lewis to stop writing it multiple times.
this is horrible.
He was like, no one's gonna be interested in this. And other people in the group actually was like, no, you don't stop. You're onto something here. It's actually pretty good. So,
Well,
but
and even taking it further back, of course, I'm kind of in tune to this whole community
yeah,
thing. My wife and I, our first overseas trip ever was last year. We went to Italy, and we
fun.
kind of did a tour of Italy. But my favorite city by far was Florence.
Okay.
You know, we saw the David, Michelangelo's David, and we all these tours. You start to learn about like the formation of David as an artist, and if anyone's read 10x is easier than 2x, there's this sort of analogy about how he created how Michelangelo created David. And you sort of think about, or I always thought about Michelangelo as sort of this like lone wolf. God gave him these like crazy genius talents, and he just like was born with a scalpel or whatever it's called to make a sculpture. And there's some element of that, of course, but very importantly, the whole community of Florence like created that. It's just like what you talked about with the authors, the Inklings. There was like very much a community that fostered challenged each other and fostered this, and they shared secrets, and they had the guilds and all this stuff. And people, I think, don't realize that without that place and time and all the other people around him, there would have been no David. Michelangelo probably wouldn't even have been a sculptor, because he was so influenced by the community that he was kind of born and found himself into as a teenager.
I think about too, like how many times do we do something because someone else around us was like, "Hey, try it," and got excited about it before we did.
Yeah,
I'm
exactly.
like, I'm starting my business because I had a couple friends who were just like, "Yes, you should like now's the time. You should start it. You should do it," which is so important. So we talked about the human side of this, and I believe innately we were designed to be in community as human beings, and what it does for you. We've talked about the business benefit of like we've seen very successful people be in community. How do you do it? Like what are the key elements of building a strong community? Like what's actually involved with that to make it good? Because I think just getting in a group, that's a great first step, but like how do we actually make this work and make it successful?
Yeah, I'll start with something you're not going to expect, and I'll talk about sort of how like I view community at its sort of like highest iteration, and then we can talk more about if someone just needs to plug into a community. But I want to
Yeah.
talk more about community creation, and I don't talk about this very much. Jacob experiences it. He maybe hasn't seen it this way, but he will now.
Okay.
I believe deeply in the Jesus model, right? And so when you think about Jesus Christ, whether you're a Christian like me or you just know this historical figure, he did not live in isolation and like go do his thing, and he could, right? Like he had all the power
Yeah.
in the world. What he actually did was bring 12 apostles around him, created a community, a tribe, and then some really important things happened by doing that. Like he was obviously the figurehead and obviously like the smartest or wisest person ever, right?
Right.
So I don't want to discount his role, but
Yeah.
his main thing was curation. So he chose these people and said, you should be in my community. And then he facilitated them to be disciples of his stuff, right? So like they could disciple, to each other, and they could go out two by two and they could support each other. He gave them this like container for discernment. So like think deeper about that. Go study this, like go challenge yourself, right? And of course, what he really ultimately did was taught them evangelization, and he taught them to leave the tribe, go out and share this message with the world. And so when I created what we call the 7-figure elite mastermind, that was the model, right? It's like initially it was 12 people. I was like, if I can find 12 amazing people
There you go.
and I could create this container, and we're talking about business, not, salvation of souls, but we're talking about we have a common purpose, growing business in a way that's mission driven and serving the world. And if I can curate a great group, give them sort of, certainly not Jesus, but give them some sort of wisdom that sort of overlays a topic that, I have experience with. But more importantly, actually, give them the freedom to be disciples to each other, discern about some things they don't usually have the time and space to do, and then evangelize. And for me, like, podcasting is just an evangelization tool for business. So
Right.
that's a deep answer, Jacob, but like that at a high level, that's like the ultimate community example. And I think I want people, if they're familiar with that model, to think about that. And of course, there's lots of different variations of community in modern times. But I think that's a really cool aspirational thing. If like, man, if I could get in that type of community, imagine the power of that.
Okay. I have a lot of follow-up questions, but I'm gonna trim it down in my head here. So I've not heard this. We didn't talk about this beforehand. This is cool because now I'm thinking about, I'm a part of your mastermind, so I'm thinking about how it's done, and I'm like, oh wow, everything we do falls into these three categories, and it's the Jesus model, the timeless model. Let me ask you this then. So Jesus had his 12. Jesus also had his three. Do you think there's value in, like, okay, yes, like the mastermind's a great example. There's between the two groups, is there like 20,
Yeah,
something like that
yeah.
in the group? Okay,
The
so
goals are on 24, and if you'll
there
notice,
you
the way
go.
we facilitate that is we have two groups of
Two groups of
12.
12.
Yeah, so yes.
It's all
And we had
clicking
12
now.
for a long time, and then when we decided to have more, I was like, we got to like 15. I'm like,
Yeah,
I think we need either 20 plus or 15 or less, because I feel like 12 is actually a really good community number.
yeah. Okay. Is there value then in, so I'm a part of this community? Is there a value in the smaller thing within the context of business? Because I think life's a little bit different, right? But is there value in even having your 3 to 4, or if I'm in a community like that, then I've kind of checked the boxes.
Yeah, I think there's definitely value in having smaller subsets within a community or just smaller communities. And there's value in being in larger communities, right? And so I'll talk about just my business, my structure real quick, and we can talk about lots of different applications in the business world. But like in my two groups of 12, right? There are people who sort of just naturally create subgroups where it's like, oh, these four people are really into email marketing, so they'll go like do
Yeah,
like their own little Zoom meetings, right? But they have a common tribe that they can come back to in the 12 or the 24 in this case. There's also the seven figure leap community at large, which is right now about 170 people. And so, Jesus had, John and Mary and whoever was in that like really inner circle at different times, but he also had disciples that weren't apostles, right? And so he
right,
had
right.
hundreds of people that were followers, and they evangelized the thing that he did. And so I think in any community, what naturally happens, those numbers are sort of like, I don't know, maybe it's natural law. There, you sort of get these like, it's the same way the military is structured, right? Like there's certain numbers where you need to break off and have a new platoon, and then you have a new battalion, and you have a new brigade, because that's just like the management of people. I think that we break off into certain numbers, right? And I don't know those numbers off the top of my head, but it's like 100 to 150 is sort of like
Like the cap of,
the cap of
yeah,
relationships you can like keep in your head and
yeah.
manage, right? And so when you get beyond that, you got to split into more and more. And so yeah, but anyway, I think there's definitely the space for more intimate community, small group, very small groups. Like I have a 4-person group that I meet every Friday morning for coffee and Bible study. That came out of like an 8-person group that sort of had some attrition over time. But there's the core 4, and I meet with them every Friday.
Yeah.
And then, you could think of something like maybe you're plugged into C12 or you're plugged into EO, Entrepreneurs Organization, like very big organizations, but you might be in a chapter of that where you meet on a much more regular basis. And
Right.
maybe there's some 3 people in that group that you just really personally have an affinity to. And maybe you guys go out to dinner as couples and they come over to your house. And so I think just naturally you'll get these different levels of intimacy within a broader community.
So something I immediately think of when I hear all this is, I'm an action person and I come from the restaurant world, so it's hard for me to waste time.
Yes.
And I'm like, okay, I'm hesitant. I have deadlines to meet. I have productivity goals to meet. Like I'm a numbers person. I'm very focused on day to day. What's the return on investment here? Because to me, I'm like, okay, this is nice. Y'all are in a community. That's great. Sounds like it's a lot of time to manage, and it's not. But like, what's the return on investment as a business owner, business leader, and being a part of a community?
Yes, great question. And I think this is an appropriate part. We can talk about 7-figure leap all day, but I think just talking in a more general sense, like if you're a business leader or a business owner and you feel isolated and you're like, I've got no more blocks on my schedule. I've got a family and I've got maybe some community or some charitable things I want to do. I'm plugged in at my church and I've got a 50-hour plus hours a week job. how would I ever make time for community? Is it really worth it? I think that's kind
Yeah.
of the core of your question, right? Jacob is like, I got to have an ROI on this, or else there's no way I can like dedicate actual time to it because my time's so finite. And what I found from personal experience in lots of different assets or aspects of my life, and with my kids and everything, the communities they're plugged into, is if you get into the right community, it's like a time multiplier, right? It's because if you're in a community, you will up level your mindset. So you're going to be more abundantly minded. You're going to be more efficient. You're going to have shortcuts at your fingertips. So when you do have a challenge, you're going to have resources to plug into that are going to actually save you a lot of time and money ultimately, right? And so it's sort of front loading an investment and saying, look, I want to invest. It could be free, but it's definitely going to cost you time. So I'm going to invest time in this community, maybe money, depending on how it's set up. For what? And I would say the for what is for the connections, for the shortcuts of the other wisdom that's in there, for the access that this can give you to different opportunities. And how do you put a price tag on your mental health? So if you're feeling lonely and you're isolated, and you will definitely in that state of mind miss opportunities that would give you a huge ROI, right? And so it's a bit qualitative, and I'm like you, engineering background, and like
Yeah. You
I
get it.
like to put numbers to things.
Yep.
There are some numbers that you can put to the community, but it's kind of like it's mostly qualitative. But qualitative improvements are actually the exponential improvements in life, right? I kind of threw out 10x is easier than 2x as a book earlier, but as a concept, the idea is if you want to like 10x something in your life, it's not a quantitative improvement. It's not like, man, I want to like 10x my business. It's not literally taking a step by step approach to getting to 10x. That'll take a very long time. It's a qualitative leap. And that leap, in my experience, it's the whole reason my company's called what it is, it happens through relationships. And so relationships are the ultimate shortcut. And so yeah, I know that's a bit of a conceptual answer, maybe, but and we could talk about ROI for like a business mastermind group,
Yeah.
but I just want to kind of generalize this into community as a whole. I think it's a qualitative improvement, which actually can be way more valuable than an incremental quantitative.
I can tell you that relationships are the ultimate shortcut is going to make a short form video later after the
There you
episode.
go. Yeah, that's all I should have said.
That's no, that's a great answer because, like you said, I mean, transparently, you and I went back and forth about me joining your mastermind, and I'm like, man, I did, the investment. I have more expenses coming this year, and I'm like, it's an hour a week and all this other stuff, and I thought you put it really well, and that, hey, the goal is that you make more money and do better in business as a result of this. And I mean, we talked about this before we started recording. This week, I got a business idea that I wouldn't have had as a result of from someone in that community. It was just a passing comment that I'm like, oh, why haven't I thought of that? And I mean, even in my previous corporate job, I can't tell you how many times I thought to myself, like, I've thought of everything in this situation. And I bring it up even just to complain about it of like, can't get over this. And someone in a second is just like, have you tried this? And it's like, no. Like, how
Yeah.
did that take you 2
Like,
seconds?
what's the value of an insight? What's the value
Yep,
of an epiphany?
that's right.
I mean, like literally, these things can change your life, and like one relationship can change the whole trajectory of your life. And we don't have to name. I'll just say her name's Cassie. In case she
Yeah.
ever listens. So like you're talking about an individual person. I have hundreds of these, but this one individual person last year in my business offered to have a call with me, and I was like frustrated. And I was at this point in my business where it felt really constraining, and I felt like I was stuck, and it was like all on me and all this pressure. Despite being in community, she sensed that, and she said, "You know what? We should talk." And then she just in 30 minutes, we went through this very simple exercise, and it just like unlocked so much stuff for me that I don't know what in the world I would, what I could have sat in that mire for months. And it was like 1 30-minute conversation with a fresh perspective gave me this sort of epiphany,
Yeah.
lifted the weight off my shoulders, made me see the world in a new way. That's the power of community, right? But it's hard to predict in advance, oh, that person's going to give me, you know,
Right.
$50 in return. This person's 50,000, because that's what's cool about humans. Is it's kind of like playing the lottery. You just don't know which one's going to like really pop. And Jacob knows, and I think this ties really well to community as a way for people to visualize what you said, that I said about, like relationships are really the driver of big results. The very first thing every person that enters my community sees on the slide is this idea that you should plant relationship seeds, right? And so again, biblical reference, sowing and
Yeah.
reaping. this idea, and this is why we use podcast guesting, but there's lots of forms of this. Like if you just show up and serve and you plant a seed of relationship capital with one person a day, so you build one relationship a day, in other words, right? Maybe it's a comment on LinkedIn, or it's texting someone, or talking to your dentist about your business. You're just like planting some little seed with no expectation of what's going to happen. Those seeds, sprout at some point, and sometimes they sprout right away. And it's like, oh, I got a new client because of my dentist, like I said
Yeah,
this and
yeah.
he connected me. But it could be in 3 years, you get this like crazy relationship, outcome. And we call those unicorns, right? You get this unicorn relationship that changes everything, and you couldn't predict it. And it's hard to quantify, but it would have never happened had you not planted the seed 3 years prior. And that's why I think community is so important, is it gives you opportunity to plant relational seeds on a regular basis with people, and then you just never know what's going to come of that, and it's usually really fun stuff.
And that's where, I mean, this is something I learned as a high schooler. I went to a leadership thing called Student Leadership University, Christian-based organization. It was great. So many one-liners that I still use. One of those are, decisions are made by those who show up.
Ooh, I like that.
And to community, it's like, hey, you're not going to get those epiphanies and stuff unless you're showing up. And half the battle is just committing to being there
Yes.
and then showing up and seeing what happens. It really is just half the battle is just showing up. And I tell so many young people now, it's like, hey, just start showing up, like you're going to start seeing results if you just show up. And I think it's so important with community is, hey, go ahead and buy in and invest the time, and then come back to me for a refund later if you hate it. You know what I
Yeah,
mean? Like,
exactly.
a lot of times it's
I,
not about a refund, but
to
yeah.
I think people relate to this too. So again, think about this as your Rotary Club, Chamber of
Yeah,
Commerce,
right.
charity that you're involved in, whatever your application. I'm in another community. It's
Yeah.
obviously a theme here. And actually, I did this whole exercise with the 10x easier than the 2x, where I went back and I looked at the 10x moments in my life, like these things where things qualitatively changed in a big way. Everyone was tied to some sort of community, and it was not something I was like pursuing at the time. But
Yeah.
one of the communities that I'm currently active in is called Front Row Dads, and so it's basically this idea that it's business owners who want to put their families first, right? And so in that, this is kind of goes right back to what we said earlier. There's 300 guys in this thing, and we do a live event. There might be 50 people, 100 people there, but I'm in a band, which is like the small group mastermind version. There's 4 people in this band, and to your point, Jacob, we've committed to each other through like this little constitution we created that we will meet once a month for 3 hours, and it's like on the last Friday of the month, right? And so you can imagine we're all busy. I get to at 1 o'clock on a Friday afternoon. There's so many things I'd rather do than show up on a 3-hour Zoom call after
Yeah.
being on Zoom, or after being on Zoom all week. I'm like, man, I could be
Yeah.
building my business, going to my kids' thing, go and play
Yeah.
golf. But I show up because I'm committed. Every single time at the end of that 3 hours, I'm like, I'm so glad I
Glad
did
I
this.
went.
I got some big insight, some relief, some help with my teenagers. Something create is always good, right? And we in that community, we start with a one word open, which is like, how you showing up, how you feeling, and it's usually like frustrated, stressed, overwhelmed,
There you
and
go.
then at the end, it's the one word close, how you feeling. It's almost always encouraged, inspired, abundant. It's like that 3 hours is kind of magic. Really easy to skip if you didn't have this commitment, but it's like going to the gym. Every time I do it, I'm like, I'm so glad I did this. So hopefully that's encouraging for people.
Okay. If I listen to this, we've been talking for almost 30 minutes, like listen to this conversation and I'm like, this all sounds great. What do I do next? Like, either, I'm working in a corporate setting and, I'm a leader, maybe my business has communities. Maybe you're a business owner and you're like, I have no idea where to go next. Like, what advice would you give to someone who wants to build or find that community? What's a great place to start?
Yeah, I think what you just said is the distinction. Do you want to build or find?
Yeah.
And I think either one of these are great options. So if you want to find a community, you're probably already aware of them. You're probably just avoiding them. You've
Right.
probably been invited to them, right? And maybe
Right.
it's something through your church or something through your work.
Yeah.
And people have invited you, be in my golf league. Like, I don't have time for that, right? Like, so say yes to a community and just go commit to it for some time, 90 days, 6 months, a year, whatever is appropriate. And so I guarantee there are communities all around you and you've just ignored them, or you've been resistant to be in one, which I've done a ton of myself. If you're like, I just don't know where to start, talk to a friend, talk to someone you admire, from a work colleague or your boss, or, someone like that. and just start asking around. Be like, yeah, I'm looking for a good community. These are the things I'm looking for. I want to because sometimes that's philanthropic. I want to give back in a community. Maybe it's business growth. Maybe it's recreation. Like these are all places to plug into a community. So if you want to find one, I think there's a lot of great resources. I'm sure there are plenty of online resources. I don't know the right website to plug in, but a community for business leaders in my town, I'm sure there's people that meet up on a regular basis and do networking and things like that. And if you want to start a community, a community is two or more. So find one other person and be
I'm
like,
sure you know one.
I'm thinking about doing, I think I want this in my life, and I'm thinking we could do this on Friday mornings before work. Would you be interested in that? And ask a few people. And then you're in the seat of curation, which is really my number one with the current business model I have. My number one role is curator, which basically means selecting, inviting, and keeping out people who aren't a good fit for the community. But if you want to start something, just, hey man, like I need one more person and we can start meeting and we'll have a community. And then once you kind of get in the rhythm of what this is about, say, hey, each of us should invite one more person and, and build from there. I'm sort of biased towards the creating community because you get to like make it what you want. You get to curate. And, that I'm speaking in more of a local sense, but obviously you could do this through Zoom or wherever. Yeah. So I think there's no shortage of community. I think it's more of the open-handed posture of, I'll say it this way. Once you decide I want a community, it's going to show up. And you're just going to have to say yes. Like there's no shortage of it.
I want to share a success story from me doing this at my corporate job as well. So it started with two people who were just like, hey, we love coffee and like specialty coffee, like coffee nerds, my kind of people. And then I ended up getting invited by like both of them were like, hey, what if we just came together once a month and like brought whatever coffee we're like, drinking or whatever. And we just had a big tasting and just hung out for an hour. And I was like, yeah, that sounds great. And then it just started to grow. I think I was in the second one. There was only 4 or 5 to us. And then maybe the last one, it was like 12 to 18 was what was regularly showing up. Just because, again, it's like, oh, you love specialty coffee. We do this thing, once a month. Do you want to come? And I think the gathering around the common goal is where it starts usually. And then you see the benefit everywhere else. Like we were getting together to just drink coffee, you know what I mean? But then I built great business relationships and learned a lot just because you're going to talk about everything else too, right? And I think your business is a good example of this. Of we kind of gather around podcasting, and that's kind of like the funnel that gets everybody in the door to your business, and
Yes.
it ends up being about much more than podcasting and how to grow your business, which I've seen the value of, which has been incredible. So I think that idea of like, hey, if you want to build one, find something you love and find someone else who loves it and start there. Like if you're a coffee nerd like me, start with coffee and just, hey, you want to go talk about coffee for 30 minutes? I think that's a
Yeah.
fun place to start.
Pickleball or start a dinner club.
That's right.
You can have a community with your spouse, with other
Yeah.
spouses. And the other thing I would say for a listener, if they're sitting there kind of sitting on their hands, being like, woe is me, there are no communities, you're probably already in a bunch of them and you're probably just very passively involved. And so you can
Yeah.
just be more active in the stuff that you're already in, right? Like you're probably involved. You're probably like a card carrying member of various communities.
That's right.
And it's just like, oh, but I could actually make a commitment. I'm going to show up once a month to that charitable board meeting, or I'm going to actually show up and volunteer with the group that I'm already a part of.
Yeah.
Or yeah, like my wheels get to turn. I'm like, man, we're involved in a lot of communities that are like our school that our kids go. They're sort of like this group of parents, and we just, it's kind of casual, but like quarterly, basically, we meet for dinner and we talk about what our kids are up to because now they're off to college. That's a community. Dinner club's a community. Poker club can be a community,
That's right.
Like golf league could be a community. But in a business standpoint, if you're wanting to get an ROI, then yeah, I think curating one's a really good way to go if you feel like that's in your DNA. Otherwise, start asking around, and it will appear. I can guarantee. I guarantee it will.
That's right. Dustin, if there's one thing a listener could take away from our conversation today, what would it be?
Man, I'm gonna go back to the cliche. I think your network is your net worth, and so what can you do as a business leader or business owner to proactively grow your network, right? And so, and if you like, I love mini goals. I would like the way I got started with LinkedIn was I decided I'm going to post something every day for 30 days. And then these conversations started happening, and all of a sudden I look up, I got 11,000 followers, and we get clients from LinkedIn all the time. That started with just a commitment to 30 days. That would be my thing, is like, issue a mini challenge to yourself for how you can grow your network and plug into one community that doesn't feel like drudgery. It says like, that'd be really fun, man. If I could start if I had a coffee club like Jacob, that'd be awesome. Well, go find one other person who likes coffee and start it, and you'd be amazed where it will take you.
I'll say networking. Go back and listen to episode 41 with Michelle Schaefer. We did a great one on networking there, and kind of this idea that networking is relationships with a purpose. And something you and I have talked about too is like, if you want to not look at networking as being snooty, like, be the one who gives.
Yes.
And you say this with podcast guesting of like, hey, go be the best guest and like give, and then see what you get out of it.
Yes.
And that's, to me, especially being in a community or networking, is like, give first, and with no expectation, but you're going to get at the end of it as well.
The law of reciprocity will take over, and it's inevitable.
Right.
That's the whole idea behind planting seeds. It's like, go give and help and serve someone, and then walk away from the whole thing, and lots and lots and lots of great, abundant, fun stuff will come your way. And so I think that's a wonderful way to frame this. If you're intimidated by the idea, it's just like, go be cool to somebody and help them.
Yeah, help them out
and see what happens. Yeah,
that's right. Another takeaway from the Jesus model: give first.
Exactly.
The Jesus mindset. Dustin, where can people connect with you if they want to find out more about 7-Figure Leap, you and your business? Where can they connect with you?
Yeah, so it's real easy. 7figureleap.com. So it's the number 7 and leap like jump. So 7figureleap.com. You're going to find a lot of stuff there about podcasting and marketing.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what we do. And if you're like, wow, I'd really like to be in a business mastermind, of course, I'd love to talk about that. Not necessarily to invite you into ours. If it's a great fit, of course, that'd be great.
Yeah.
This is something that I'm passionate about. So if someone's just like, I just want to like talk to Dustin about how to find the right mastermind or what to do next in my business, like that's how I like to give, is through serving people and growing their business. So the 7figureleap.com, you can get a hold of me there, get a call on our calendar, and we'll take it from there if it makes sense.
I love it. And I'll have that linked below in the episode description. Dustin, thank you so much for being on the podcast. Loved our conversation. Audience, thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Waves Business Coaching Podcast. We'll see you next time. Take care.